being in community, advocating for causes I care about, that energizes me. There are a lot of weeks that go by where I have a meeting or an event to go to and I am tired. I don't feel like I have the time. I'm sacrificing something else. But I never leave those opportunities, whether it's volunteering or showing up on a board or whatever it is. I never leave those things feeling like I wish I hadn't gone.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Immediate Moments, the podcast exploring the journey to finding and owning your voice. I am your host, Ahis, and today I am joined by Lalu Beré. Lalu is a senior brand manager at Plexus Corp in the Fox Cities area of Wisconsin. So, in the spirit of full disclosure, Lalu and I went to business school together at the Kellogg Store of Management class of 2019, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. It's been 7 years now. But since then, I've watched her from afar as she's poured herself into the work of building community. So she's served on multiple local nonprofits, civic boards, she volunteered her time, and she's helped multiple organizations expand their impact. So she has a lot of accolades. She's been recognized as one of the Northeast Wisconsin's 40 under 40. I think last year, named Fox Cities Future 15 honoree, and she serves on the boards of the Fox Cities Performing Arts Center and the board of the Capital Credit Union. So today we're talking about building community alongside a career. And I do not mean just joining a WhatsApp group, because that's how a lot of us find community these days. But I mean really becoming a part of the place where you actually live, the place where you buy groceries, the place where you eat at restaurants, the place where you raise your family. And whether we talk about it or not, we all are aware that loneliness is a real issue today across multiple communities. So this conversation is going to be about this question of how do we go beyond our careers and become really part of the fabric of the places that we live in. So Lalu, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. He's great to see you.
Before we get into the main topic of today, I want to start with your story and your background. So, based on my research, I understand your dad moved to the States, to St. Paul, Minnesota in the 70s, and your mom is from Minnesota. So, in a lot of ways, you grew up between those two very different cultures. So, how was life like growing up in that environment, and how did that shape and impact your voice and your sense of identity?
My parents really are the driving force behind who I am. My father did come here in the 70s, and over the course of the 80s and the 90s, he was bringing his family from Ethiopia to the States. So I was lucky to grow up with aunts, cousins. At one point, my grandmother lived here, and I was very embedded in Ethiopian cultural practices because we spent every holiday with an extended family friend group. I took Amharic lessons, the official language of Ethiopia, with some of my dad's friends' kids. It was never a question that our identity was very steeped in Ethiopian culture, even though we were living in the States. And my mom is from southern Minnesota, Rochester, where the Mayo Clinic is based. And her family is Irish Catholic, kind of a Eurocentric, diverse Eurocentric background, but really identified with their Irish identity. She grew up going to Catholic school, and that's where she really learned about social justice and the importance of helping people who were in need and who had less than you. As my parents instilled those values in me, I became very family-centric. A lot of what we did was really rooted in our family practices, but really thought about giving back as a core part of what we did together, how they spent their careers. And so that really helped shape who I am. And being a biracial woman, certainly as a kid, what that meant to me was evolving. But I came to really love and appreciate that I had all of these different aspects of my background that made me uniquely me. Certainly had moments of struggle trying to find what that meant, but overall felt very loved and appreciated for being uniquely myself, which is very much a credit to my parents.
That's awesome that you had such a nurturing and loving home growing up. But you mentioned how your dad brought your extended family and then how that helped you. So I am one of four. Growing up, I always wanted to come study in the States, so I came here for college. That's how I started in Kentucky before moving around the States a bit. And I've always had that goal too, that I wanted to bring my family here so my kids we can all, have family reunions and everybody can, be at the cookout and that kind of thing. But I was able to bring my mom. So my mom actually does live with us. So they do have Nigerian, eat the jollof rice. My kids get exposed to
You
part
got
of
to.
Nigerian culture. But I tried to get my siblings here, but I have not succeeded. So, but they're in the UK, in Europe. So I have two siblings in the UK and on Warren Island. You haven't seen my youngest yet. So we're trying actually to plan a trip to go to Europe so we can all be together as a family. But one of the things you mentioned that I want to double click on is this concept of evolving. Your identity was evolving. Because as I kind of thinking about being biracial and sort of having this identity that like your dad didn't quite have that life, your mom also doesn't have that experience, and none of those your two support system have that type of experience. So, what was your pillar of support during that time? Like, how did you? Was there any like organizations additionally to your parents that was helping you navigate this time as you sort of grow up during those years?
What became my strength was figuring out how to connect with people who were different than me because everyone was different than me. I didn't know any other biracial, half African child of a first generation immigrant kids. I didn't have another model for what I was. And so my strength became find the thing where I can connect with someone and build a relationship on that. So, in my upbringing, school, education, extracurriculars, whatever those things were, finding those connections with people at school, like that's how I built friendships and relationships. With my family, we had our connection because, holidays, food, all the things about being family, being Ethiopian, like that was where we got together. And even growing up with our parents not knowing how to help us navigate American culture, we did that together. So I think, as I got older, I would look to celebrities like Mariah Carey was my first inspiration as a biracial person. That was the first person I saw where I thought, oh, okay, this is a big face in the world who looks like me. Barack Obama was a big inspiration to me. Trying to find those models and examples really meant a lot. But I do think growing up, I had to just find a way to navigate that on my own because there weren't really formal supports in that way. And, my mom did her best, but like she didn't know how to navigate. My dad didn't know what to do with a daughter growing up in the US who had needs and wants that like he growing up in Ethiopia never would have thought about. So it was challenging in that way. But I think, again, like just trying to build connection has always been the way that I have survived and thrived.
It's awesome. I think that resonates even in the corporate world today. Maybe sometimes it's not race. It could be nationality. Sometimes you work with people who come from different nationalities. It could be black, but it could be Ghanaian. You could be from Zimbabwe. We're both Africans. And there could still be some differences there. But I do like that concept of finding things that connect you and sort of building upon those things, having something in common that everybody sort of pursues at the same time. So I want to stay on the topic of your family history. So there was an article in the Minnesota Public Radio in 2002 about your first family trip together to Ethiopia. So I just want you to rewind for a second here. I know this is over 20 years ago, but if you still remember what that experience was for you at the time, and also what it taught you about yourself, your parents, and your history.
Yeah, that was a really special trip because we went for a wedding, but we stayed the entire summer. So it was 3 months of living there. And after the first 2 weeks and the festivities of the wedding died down, my parents and I were just exploring the city. We were in Addis Ababa. We were living with an aunt and uncle of mine. And we were really able to be immersed in everyday life. So my mom and I built our language capabilities enough that we could navigate public transportation. We were taking like mini taxis and getting to different places around the city, getting ourselves to visit different family members. And I think for me, it reinforced that I was Ethiopian because, again, being biracial, having a different experience than my cousins who came to the States, but they, both of their parents were Ethiopian. I always felt a little other. And when I was there and living there and able to really feel connected to people, feel connected to the place, I think that was the first time I could settle into like I am an Ethiopian person and really own that. It was very empowering. Like it helped me establish for myself that this is not just my father's identity or the identity of my extended family, but it is me.
That's very powerful. So what would you say? Because first of all, I didn't know it was 3 months. I thought it was like a 2 week, 3 weeks have a trip, but 3 months. I think that's like not just that's like you living in a place. I think 3 months is pretty solid to have a good sense of how that place works. So I guess is there anything in particular that made you feel welcome or that made you feel like part of that community? Was it just the way people like welcomed you, embraced you, food? Like, is there any elements like that comes to mind?
I really do think language was the pivotal element there because we were able to communicate. And you know, I have felt a lot of shame in my life that I don't speak the language well. And at that time, just because we had to force ourselves to learn how to ask for things, buy things at the store, tell the taxi where we were going, these basic methods of communication, just seeing the response of like local people, their eyes lighting up when we could have a
Yeah.
conversation or their appreciation of that. I think that was really the difference maker because everything else felt somewhat, I shouldn't say everything else, but like, food and practices that we still honored at home in Minnesota felt familiar. But I never had to speak the language because we all spoke English with the Americans or with the non-Amharic
Yeah.
speakers. So I think that really made the difference.
Wow, language is such a powerful tool. So, you, how did you learn American? Did I guess your dad primarily teach you American home, or did you learn from like I don't know courses or school or something like that?
It was all very organic, and I will
Okay.
admit, because if my dad listens to this, he will call me out, but I do not speak it well. Just spending time with our family, kind of the organic way you pick up language
Yeah.
in a more immersive situation. There are now some more formal tools, but this
Yeah.
language is only spoken in Ethiopia. So there's no Duolingo,
Sure.
there's
Yeah.
no real tools for it.
Yeah. Don't feel any type of shame. I am from Nigeria, grew up in Nigeria, but I don't speak any of our local languages. I
Mm,
kind of understand some. And the reason is my mom and dad are from two different parts of Nigeria.
mhm.
And Nigeria has like over 200 different like local dialects. So they did not have a common local language. So they both have different languages. So the only common language between the two of them was English. So that's how I grew up. That's what we spoke. It's English or Pidgin English. That's like the sort of local equivalent of broken English. But I can't speak either one. When my uncles from my dad's side would come home, would come visit us, my dad and them would speak their language. And when my mom's like side of the family comes, my mom and them would speak their language. So I would understand some of just from those interactions. But I remember actually my grandma. So I went to the village to see my grandma on my mom's side. Actually, she taught me how to drive a bicycle.
Mm.
My grandma on my mom's side, but we never could communicate. Like we could never, like she did not know any lick of English at all. I did not know her language, but we spent days together, and that was really a cool bonding experience. Now I think about it, but she was teaching me how to ride a bicycle, and she couldn't speak. We couldn't talk. We'd just be there. We'd just be
Yeah.
like walking through the bicycle, and it was like 3 days. It was just maybe 3 days or so. But as I look back, it was such a beautiful experience. Like, she tried to teach a grown child how to, but she just couldn't speak to me. She just couldn't understand me. I just couldn't understand her. But we're able to walk through it. And it's a fun memory now I look back on. Even within a country, sometimes it happens when you have people who are from different tribes and the kids are just kind of like in the middle. You don't speak either language. So, but as you've grown older now, like, what's your relationship with Ethiopia been like? And also, like, obviously, in Minnesota, there's a significant population of Ethiopians. How's it in Wisconsin?
Mm.
How's that like?
Not as strong in Wisconsin,
Yeah,
but there are, if you go to Milwaukee, you could find Ethiopian
yeah,
restaurants and some presence of Ethiopians. But yeah, I mean, I miss living in the Twin Cities. I took for granted just having access to the richness of culture right there in the city. And I miss being there. We get back to visit my parents a lot and see our family, but yeah, I do miss having it right in front of me. I think what I carry with me about Ethiopia every day is just the way that people take care of each other and invite others in and care for each other, because it's a very hospitable culture. It's a very giving culture. My parents, when I was growing up, they had a group, what's called Mahaber. It's like a family friend group, and we spent every holiday with them. In Ethiopia, that can be a group of families where if one family falls on hard times or has someone pass away or needs money for a repair, the whole group comes together and gives to that. And that is what leads me most in my daily life, what I hold dear as part of my Ethiopian culture. I want my kids to eat the food and I want my kids to know the music and be able to hear the language and recognize it. But I think it's really the way of being that is most important for me to pass on.
So I think that gets to the heart of what we're talking about today, which is communities. And it sounds like that started for you even from like growing up and sort of from how your parents raised you. So you did mention Minnesota in your last response. And I think a lot of time people think about Minnesota as a very quiet place and people are very polite you know what I mean? In Minnesota. But also you think about some of the significant events in the US the last decade or so. You think about from George Floyd to the ICE protests this year. And so to me, just looking from afar, it just seemed like Minnesota is a place of activism, of like where social justice, the very important part of the fabric of the community. And like the protest and organizing. In order for you to have those protests and stuff, you have to organize first to get people together to join a common cause. So I think from a service and a social justice aspect, like how did just growing up in a place like Minnesota sort of inform some where you are today and your participation in your local community in Wisconsin today?
Yeah. I'm very grateful for growing up in Minnesota. And this is where I would say my mom's influence came in more because, as you said, there's a very strong community of activists and of community organizers. So I was exposed to that at a very young age. And part of that was connected to my mom spending her whole career in nonprofit. But even beyond that, when I was young, we would door knock for political candidates, whether they were local or state, national elections. So that was a normal thing. We would show up to protests. One of the biggest events of the year we always went to was the May Day parade, which is really organized around labor and workers' rights. And there's a really strong union history in Minnesota. My grandfather was a plumber and he was a union member his whole career. So I took for granted how normalized that was and how much that was a part of my life growing up. Seeing Minnesota be in the spotlight for activism, standing up against what's not right, people being treated poorly, fighting on behalf of immigrants, fighting on behalf of Black folks, like that feels very natural to me, having grown up there. And that's the Minnesota I know. And I think it's fantastic that this has continued for generations and the spread of that impact is on the national stage, because I think it's a great model for the rest of the country.
I think for me, it's always awesome because you think about those social issues and you think places like New York. I mean, they still have organizing happening, like local efforts in those places for like immigration top issues, like New York, the LAs of this world, the Atlanta, the Chicago's, like the big cities that are like melting pots for different people. But I feel like Minnesota for sure punches above its weight when it comes to those issues and leads the way because a lot of, especially on the ICE, speaking on the topic of immigration specifically, and some of those ICE protests, I think the administration changed its course specifically because of some of the efforts of the local leaders and the activists and the protests and all the different things that happened in Minnesota early this year. I know I saw you posted a lot on Instagram during that time, when was this? February, early this year, right? It feels like several months
January,
ago.
February.
January, February, yes, January, February. And I did do a little video because I remember I dropped my daughter. I think it was after the Renee Good killing. I think it was after that. I remember I dropped my daughter off at daycare, and I just like literally there's probably been only a couple of times I've actually cried and like the tears in my eyes, and since I've been in this country, and that was one of them.
Mm.
And I sat there in the car. I'm like, what can I do? Like look for protests in Atlanta. Like I was just trying to think about what to do. I ended up just doing a video about my saying what I thought about the issue and posting on LinkedIn and socials and such. But I also saw you on IG stories and different things and posting things about it. When you decided to speak up on this type of issue, because sometimes like, okay, this is LinkedIn or this is, I don't want people to, I don't want to be political about it. You know what I mean? But this thing really impacts me very deeply. But at the same time, I know there might be people who are on the opposite side of the political spectrum who might be colleagues with at work or in the community. And so how do you think about that? How did you think through the whole thing before you actually put stuff out there, whether it's IG or any kind of other social media?
Back in the day, I will say I didn't think about it. I was generally around a lot of people who shared the same mindset as me. And so I would post much more regularly without giving it a second thought. When I moved to Northeast Wisconsin, that was the first time I had a lot of relationships with people who did not share my political views or didn't believe the things that I believed or didn't want to be really involved in politics. I do think it's a risk to share your views with others, but I also know that for myself, I have a lot of social capital. I have a lot of resources compared to the average person. I have a lot of power compared to the average person. And so if not me, who else is going to stand up and speak their mind on some of these issues? And so I think the older I get, the more I think of, and frankly, the more, I achieve in my career and I have all of these things that give me that social capital and that power, the greater I think my responsibility is to advocate for people who cannot. And also to highlight the voices of the people who are really impacted. So during the ICE activity that was happening in Minnesota in January and February, I was trying to be intentional about finding the accounts that were being led by activists and organizers on the ground and who were really connected to the immigrant community and connected to the impact so that the story being told was truly their story. And so I think that's one, probably a learning too, as I've gotten older and been more thoughtful, especially in the world of social media, about what to amplify and what not to amplify. Because I think it's very easy to take maybe accounts or profiles that are more popular. And so I try to do a bit more vetting, I'd say, of what I'm sharing. But when I believe in it, I feel like I have to say it, because if not me, like, who is it going to be?
But I really do like the framing of like, if not you, then who? There's a reason why, I think some of the privilege we have, like, whether it's from our academic, going to a place like Kellogg School of Management and the kind of jobs that we have, it's a privilege and a blessing that we have. But like, why do we have this blessings, right? Like, why do we have this privilege? It's just to like, for ourselves and for our family. So that's, I think about it very similarly, that I've come to where I'm at for a reason and to try to make the impact that I can. So going back to a couple of questions before, you talked about your parents and how they were impactful to your sense of social justice growing up. But now as a mom, I just want to go sort of forward now. How has that impacted you? And from the sense of, as I mentioned, like in terms of community, we are as professionals, you have your career, you have kids, and then you have this, in your case, like also this different activities that you're doing in the community. So how do you, I guess, one, balance, being a good mom to your kids and a good wife to your husband and doing the stuff you need to do at work, but also having the time to participate in the various organizations that you do?
It's hard. Having kids, being a working parent is not easy. But I'll say two things. So the first is being in community, advocating for causes I care about, that energizes me. There are a lot of weeks that go by where I have a meeting or an event to go to and I am tired. I don't feel like I have the time. I'm sacrificing something else. But I never leave those opportunities, whether it's volunteering or showing up on a board or whatever it is. I never leave those things feeling like I wish I hadn't gone. So for me personally, it's energizing because that helps me align to my purpose and my values in a way that I can't get anywhere else or in any other way. But then the other thing is, like, when I think about my kids, and as you said, being a mom, I want my kids to know that I lived the values and the morals that I convey to them. So, even from a young age, I was taking my daughter to Juneteenth events, Latino Fest, Pride. Being a mom, as I think about how I parent my kids, I want them to feel like I am living my values and my purpose. And I want them to be shown what that looks like so that they can model it. So, it's showing up for community events like Pride, like Juneteenth, like Latino Fest, which we have here, all of these events where we can celebrate and embrace diverse groups, marginalized groups, just be an advocate, be a supporter, because I want them to know that being in community doesn't always have to mean volunteering or any kind of specific narrow path. Sometimes it's just showing up and being a supporter in the background to another group of people. And that, I think, is something we can do as a family even now. My kids are 4 and 2, but eventually I want it to be giving their time, giving their talent, doing things together that help us build the community that we want.
I love that. I love involving your kids even at such an early age. So as I mentioned before we started recording, it's something that my wife and I has been thinking about, like looking for actual organizations to be a part of. We just have not succeeded yet. we, we are working on it. But I think part of the challenge too is like finding something that our kids can be a part of. I think that's why it's been a real challenge for us. Like nail down, like this is it. I was thinking like, okay, maybe we should think about some food banks. And like there's a lot of like boys and girls club volunteering events that happens in the evening time. But that means like I can't do bedtime.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I can't do dinner time and bedtime. It's like, okay, I can't do that. So okay, can we find like a weekend event that so the kids are not in school or in daycare and then we can all go? And so yeah, there's those additional challenges that you have to go through from being a parent. But you did say something I want to come back to. That is the idea of like if you do something that you're passionate about or something that it energizes you, it doesn't feel like work. And so maybe that's the real trick. And for me, I've been trying to say, okay, can we find something that's like immigrant related? Because that's something that I am passionate about. And a lot of that kind of stuff, because we live in the burbs, a lot of that kind of happens in the city, like inside Atlanta. And then I'm like, all right, I gotta take the whole family. So it's all these like different things. But I promise it's something that I am actively working on. So that's why I wanted to have a conversation like this with someone who's like actually like doing it and putting in the work. So it sounds like I guess one of the things to do is to maybe start with something you're passionate about, something that energizes you, that doesn't feel like work.
Mhm.
So I just want to make this a little practical for someone listening now, like a mid-career professional, maybe with kids, maybe not, that has not done anything like this before. Like, how would you advise them going about like looking for organizations that may align with their values?
Well, first of all, I think it is okay in different seasons of life to do the things that work in that season of life. So, a couple of the boards I'm on, a lot of the meetings are during the workday. So, I can get home, do bedtime, and then if I need to catch up, I've got time afterwards or I find time on the weekend. So, I think it is realistic and smart to
Yeah.
think about getting involved in things that work for your life where you're at, because seasons change and things are dynamic. I used to do a lot of volunteering where I was in the trenches, serving food at a homeless shelter or, showing up to teach a junior achievement lesson every week for 12 weeks. I can't do that anymore. But the way I can give time is on boards and in different kind of episodic community engagements. That works better for me right now. So, what I'd say to someone looking for an opportunity is think about how you can engage with community in a way that it also benefits you. And that may sound a little selfish, but find a board where maybe there are people you want to meet, or find an opportunity to volunteer with a friend who you don't get enough time to see. Start small, find what those opportunities are, and just build over time. Don't feel the pressure to dive into something wholeheartedly as a part-time job or, full-on side hustle. Like, I don't think that doesn't build the right sort of practice in your own life. And I've made this mistake where I've tried to take on a lot of different things because I felt pulled towards all these organizations, and I ended up not being able to give any of them what they really deserved. So I've gotten better about being really selective and adding slowly over time as it has made sense.
We've talked about how you're on boards. You do different things. Like, is there some common thread that ties all of this to say, okay, is it like it has to be like a social justice type issues? Like, is there a common thread across the board of the different activities that you're part of in your community?
Yeah, for me, I just believe that every person deserves the opportunity to live a meaningful life. And there are many barriers that get in the way of that. So I try to align myself with organizations that are helping reduce those barriers and create opportunity. For example, like when I was younger, I was really passionate about education and financial literacy. I volunteered for years with them, working with young people to help expose them to economics and financial systems and to learn the lessons of being an entrepreneur. Later in life, I worked for United Way for a year, and I was really passionate about financial stability and gave my time to help make the decisions in our United Way as to where we would fund programs that helped people create that financial stability in their lives. Now I'm on the board of a credit union whose mission is to provide financial education and improve the well-being of our communities. And we do that through a lot of different opportunities that are generated from the business of the credit union, but then can give back to the community, as well as creating more economically impactful financial products through their operations. And then the Performing Arts Center, to me, a core part of leading a meaningful life is feeling like you belong. So our Performing Arts Center locally has as part of its mission to be a multicultural gathering place. And they're very intentional about bringing art to that space that represents different races, ethnicities, sexual orientations, gender, all kinds of identities that can be seen in the arts. And that to me is the common thread. Like, how do you create systems and resiliency in a community so that every person can lead a meaningful life?
That's awesome. I like that thread of the system. It's supposed to just like, okay, I mean, it's nice working at food bank and giving people food, but what if we can give you a mortgage to start your own business or maybe to buy a home? So I like that framing of thinking about just from a systemic type level. You mentioned, or we've mentioned, how you're part of a couple of boards. So how did you get to be on those boards? Did you reach out to them? Did they reach out to you? Like, how does that come about?
I think, putting yourself out there is the best way to let people know what you want. Just be direct. So I was looking for new opportunities at that time of my life, probably 2.5 years ago, when I joined both boards. And it was a little bit of a, when it rains, it pours situation, because I had shared with a few people I was looking for my next opportunity. I raised my hand for different volunteerism, kind of short-term things at that time. And I just started showing up to a lot of community spaces where people saw me. I was able to speak with people who might be connected to these things I wanted. But I do think it's really important to show up and to put something in. Like any good relationship, if you want to be in a type of role like a board member, you've got to show and put a little into the piggy bank, if you will, just to demonstrate that you care and that you want to be a part of something. And so that worked for me. But I would say, the starting point is like find that organization and start to give a little bit, to start to come to their events, maybe go volunteer on a Saturday afternoon with your family, find a way that you can show your interest and put a little time in to then get that opportunity.
So it sounds like it's steps. It's baby steps. You can't just say, wake up one day and not do anything with these ladies and say, hey, by the way, I'd like to join your board. Right? You got to put in some time. You got to put in some investment, volunteer, join these events, as you mentioned. A lot of people who maybe listen to this show now or episode now live in places where they did not grow up. And sometimes when you move to a place like after business school or after college, and you just like, okay, the only thing you have is your career. It's like your job. Like you live in New York City or whatever. And you're like, all right, I'm here now, but it's just me and my job. And maybe I have a couple of friends and that's it. But like how, for someone who, let's say recent graduate college graduates who got their first big gig in a medium-sized city. I don't know why Lexington, Kentucky is coming to my mind, but let's take Lexington, Kentucky. Like a medium-sized or small town, this medium-sized city. You're in a new place, you didn't grow up there, and that kind of stuff. Like, what are some practical ways you can get involved? It's either like look for local food banks, local volunteering events. What are some like tangible ways someone like that could start getting involved?
Yeah, I think I'll tie a few themes we've talked about together here in my answer. So the first is, how I always start out is find a connection, find a person where you share an interest. Maybe it's a rec sports team, or it's, you find someone that you meet at your gym in a class, or you find someone at work where you have a shared interest, and just use that connection to find the next thing you can do together. In the nonprofit space, they are always looking for volunteers. So being open to asking and listening to what they really need. Every nonprofit has needs. I can promise you that. Ask them what they have to offer, what they need help with, and maybe there'll be a match and an alignment with your talent and your skills. Or maybe you'll just be open to doing something new. I think asking is really important in nonprofits because, like I said, they always have a need, but finding the right way to help should be led by what that need is. And then I think, really being open to putting your time in and proving and demonstrating that you want to show up. That's the only way to build community. Just like any relationship, it has to be two-sided. You have to be open to maybe trying something that is different for you or doesn't look exactly like what you had in mind. But I think in my experience, when I've been able to demonstrate authentically, like, hey, I want to be here, I have something to offer, I'm not trying to find the answer, I'm trying to listen and understand how I can contribute to your needs. That's the best way I've found to really genuinely become a part of a new community.
Awesome. So if I can summarize some of the key themes from today, I think one of it is just showing up, like just literally showing up to events and such. And then that's how you build community and meet those people who may be like-minded and share similar passion. And also asking in terms of like, you may have certain type of skills that you want to use, certain type of needs, and those organizations who may have certain type of needs, sometimes they match, sometimes they don't. But the first step is you have to ask first. So to all the people listening, in my own journey, I'm a work in process in this area, but it's something that I constantly think about because I do think it's important beyond just our immediate families and beyond just our professional career to also be a part of the fabric of the place that we live and we eat and we go to the movies and we have fun and do all that stuff. But let's fast forward now 20 years from now. What do you want your kids to be able to tell someone about the type of impact that their mom had?
I want them to say that I was generous with my time and that I was kind and that I created a better world than the one that I inherited.
That's awesome. I feel like we could just end there. But I have one last question for you.
Okay.
And this is the question I ask all my guests, which is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
When I was in college, I was involved in student government and we worked closely with the director of campus life. And he said a phrase that has stuck with me and that I use to think about any challenging situation, which was, life is simple, not easy, difficult, not complicated, which essentially means these tough decisions that we face, they're usually simple. We usually know the answer and the right thing to do. It's not easy to do those things, but it's not complicated. And you just have to find the strength to follow the path that you know is right. And that guides me every day.
That's so deep. That's such a powerful advice. Anyways, Lalu, I really appreciate your time today. This has been a very inspiring conversation. And I hope our listeners get some practical tips today on how they can be a part of their own immediate communities. And for all those listening, if you're not a subscriber to the show yet, please do so. You can subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen. That's it for today. I am Ahis, and until next time, stay unmuted.